Good afternoon to one and all present here. This is Priyanka, an intern of Aimo Tnsb. I cordially invite each and every one of you here to attend webinar on the topic Can Online Education Replace Traditional Education? Organized by Aimo, All India Manufacturers Organization, founded by Sir Vishwesvaraya in 1941. Aimo has more than 80 years of successful track record as Chamber of Commerce. Aimo used to conduct awareness educative program for all industries month on month for our members as well as non-members. In this connection, today we Aimo going to conduct a educative awareness program for students because as famous quote says, education is the most powerful weapon for changing the world. Hence, it clearly shows that Aimo not only cater into just MSMEs but also for service sectors, industry, individual business owners, and educational institutions. We have lot of prominent institutions as our members. We jointly conduct mega event with India's premier institution, Anna University called Techno, on April 22nd and 23rd, 2022. Stay to become a prestigious member for AIMO TNSB. Kindly log in into www.aimotnsb.com. Download membership form and fill it up and send it to us. Today we have Mr. N. Jayachandran Sir, Director, IIKE Institute, National Career Service Counselor, Ministry of Labor and Employment, to speak about Can Online Education Replace Traditional Education? Our company deemed to felicitate memento of appreciation to our resource person. Thank you, sir. Let's welcome our speaker to take over this informative webinar.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm audible to you all, and I'm very happy to meet you through this webinar. And let us have a fair amount of discussion about the present scenario of education. Right now, we are in a crossroads. The traditional education, and now because of COVID, there is a change. The change is with regard to how come the new model of education is being taken to places. We cannot avoid any kind of change. Change is a natural process and that must be happening. But sometimes there are problems when such a changes happen abruptly. We have to adapt the system, we have to adopt the system, and these changes must happen slowly. Unfortunately, because of this COVID, or fortunately because of this COVID, a new mode of education is being spread very faster. And for people who are listening to this webinar, it may be a news for you. These kinds of online platforms are different kind of online modes. It's not the first time. This is not the first step. Even in 1940s, when polio was an epidemic, when polio was spreading like wildfire, the education was taken through radios at that point of time. Now we are taking to internet. That at that point of time it was done through radios, but still we didn't continue with radios. We could have continued with radios itself, right? Why didn't we continue with radios? Because there were some misgivings in the radio based education that was happening then, and that was one of the reasons why we got back to the traditional mode again. But still but still we adapt it. It may be another channel for furthermore giving the informations, but it cannot become the only channel. Any kind of knowledge cannot be just given by one platform alone. Take the outer world for example, the information world for example. It is not just your news alone is giving you examples. Even certain movies say you certain things, right? Certain informations are best passed and preserved in a movie rather than being a documentary or a kind of news reels or something like that. So every way, every medium has its own potential, has its own positives, has its own negatives. And today we are going to be discussing the issues or the challenges with regard to the online education, and we just fairly want to compare it with how come it is one step ahead and one step backward than that of the traditional education. So before we start, once again I welcome you all, guys, for this session. So this topic is itself, as a thing to say, is something that we are going to try and build an opinion in the society. So I want you to get into this topic with that idea. We are going to be doing something that is going to benefit the society. So now today's topic: Can online education replace traditional education? So before we go much detail into this topic, what is education? What is education? As education means Somebody just giving a knowledge, some other person writing it down and having a test on it, does this alone mean education? No. Education is a collective of lot of things. Lots and lots of things come together, and that is what is being called as education. When you go and meet a teacher, they give you confidence, the way in which to speak, decorum, idea of dressing, idea of grooming, okay, how to stand, your body languages, soft skills, confidence, team player, being a part of team and doing something, social skills, understanding others, being punctual. All these things are clubbed together and combined as the conventional model of education that has been given to us till date. Some of this are being continued and enhanced by the online education, some of which has not been respected. Okay, so there are lots and lots of ways. So if somebody says that education is nothing but a transfer of some documents from one place to another, that is not education. Education is a holistic thing. Okay, be it online or be it offline or traditional, all these things must be traveling from one place to another, one mind to another. That is what education is. So if you think that it is just a document transfer, then you have misunderstood what education is all about. So with this idea of what education is, are the new venues online education fulfilling these priorities of education completely, is what we're going to be discussing. So the reason why I started with giving this definition is I always believe when you understand the definition properly, you can find a solution very easily. Most of the time, we don't even understand what it is, and we jump on to give conclusions and we jump on to give suggestions about it. So basically, understand what a definition is. No matter what topic you're going to be discussing, go for the definitions. What is education? Be the simplest terms you take in. Decipher it. Understand it properly. When you get the understanding, when you get that definition properly, you can solve anything. Basically, I believe in India there is a bigger problem. The problem is nothing but we don't accept a problem as a problem. There are lots of problems in the society. We've been till date for the last 70 years. We've been discussing 73 years. We have been discussing of the republic. We've been discussing 70 years of 75 years of independence. We have been discussing whether it's a problem or not. And no, we have not come nearer to the question of accepting whether it's a problem or not. Yes, it's a problem. When you accept it, only then the solution begins. So this webinar, we're going to discuss more about the problems than about the positives. Because if you root out these negatives, then ultimately this idea of whatever may be the online or traditional education goes to the next level, human enhancement. It is going to help the society. So instead of just praising, as we have done this in positive sense, we have to go root out the negatives. So this seminar, I'll be discussing about the negative aspects of the online education that has happened recently, and I've taken the last 2 years as my case study. The last 2 years we have had a effective online education all over the world. How far that online education has fulfilled the desired needs to be termed it as education, online education, and just not a file transfer. Has it fulfilled all the needs? Has it done all the other extra things that need to be done, latent and manifest function that everything has it fulfilled it? Okay, so we are going to be discussing about that. So once again, my friends, I think the presentation is visible. So these are some of the good quotes that I envy about education. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of mind to think, said by Albert Einstein. So this definition will make you understand what education is all about. It is not just a transfer of facts. It's about training the mind to do a lot of things. The highest education is that which do not merely give us information, but make our life in harmony with all existence. Rabindranath Tagore. By education, I mean an all-round drawing of the best in the child and man in the body, mind, and spirit. So these are some of the best quotes on education. Can you get what these great persons mean about education? They say it is not just the transfer of information or transfer of fact that you can call it as education. It's about a holistic development of mind, body, spirit, and their creative abilities, etc., etc. Only when these things happen together, you can call it as a education. If these things are not happening, you can never call that as a complete education. So with that being said, is the online education fulfilling these holistic needs? If it is fulfilling, yes, online education can replace the traditional education. If it's not fulfilling, then no, online education cannot replace the traditional education. That's it. So now we are going to be factually seeing the case study of last 2 years. Has these things happened? Has this holistic indicators happened in the last 2 years, so that we can claim online education can replace or not? Okay. Or it is just the temporary bottlenecks that are present right now, that are not enabling for such a good effective transfer. And if you overcome these bottlenecks, you can definitely have a effective knowledge transfer. If that is going to be happening, then we can come up with the somewhat an acceptable solution. Yes, online education can replace a traditional education. So with that being said, we'll go directly into some of the statistical analysis of what is happening. Okay, so now let us have just a simple comparison, my friends. So in online education, the method of teaching is digitalized tools and methods of teaching. All these things comes together. In traditional, it is the traditional tools, chalk, board, and all other things. With regard to cost and time, in comparison with the traditional education, online education is more cost effective. You don't need to spend that much. There are lots of platforms. The money you're going to be spending for attending a class is some more than one third, not more than one third of the traditional amount. Okay. And likewise the time spent on, sometimes some extracurricular knowledges, some certification courses, you can attend these things in your own time. You don't need to waste a day. You can have other works to do as well as you can do these things. So in that sense, this is time saving. It's flexible. It gives you the things in your desired time, or in the time with which you are ready mentally also. Okay, while the traditional education, it is expensive in comparison with online education. It consumes more time because you have to spend a day in the proper day night setup. While that doesn't apply for online education, you can record a session, listen it up in the in your night study also, whatever it may be. Okay, so that luxury is not there in traditional education. The cost effectiveness and time saving luxury is not there in traditional education. Location: virtual internet is a location for online education, while in traditional education it is physical. So sometimes this physical presence itself becomes a hurdle for a better traditional education. There are lots and lots of discriminations, lots and lots of hurdles, lots and lots of expensive things to do when you want to make yourself physically present. You have to get up early in the morning. Sometimes you may be having somewhat a bad disease. You may be sick. You have to skip the class if it is going to be a traditional physical classroom. While of course in a virtual classroom you can attend it. You can lie down on your bed, you can attend it. So that comfort is there. And next, there are certain hilly places, hilly areas, remote locations where reaching the school itself becomes a tougher task. So in that, when that is going to be the case, particularly for Indian scenario, like Indian scenario, most of the time the girls will be the at the receiving end. Most of them, they'll not be sent to the for such a long distance to travel. Likewise, in Indian scenario, we have caste based discriminations also happening, that may prevent, and that has been preventing physical presence in many parts of the country. Even now you can see a controversy that is happening, where in which a physical presence of one particular community is being not wanted in the very neighboring state of Tamil Nadu. While in the case of virtual classrooms, you will not be having this problem at all. If you just put your camera into off, nobody can create a problem out of it. Okay, so this is not going to be a problem at all. So in fact, the issue would have been solved completely. Okay, so I don't think that this is the way to solve the issue. I'm saying that these kinds of unwanted things, these kinds of making problems, physical presence as a problems, can be overcome with online educations. Caste based discriminations can be overcome. Gender based discriminations can be overcome. Community based discriminations can be overcome. So in that sense, for Indian context, if the online classes are effectively implemented, lot of discriminations can be overcome, and effective knowledge can be given to furthermore people. But we have lots of bottlenecks for that to make happen. We don't have proper internet connection, we don't have proper connectivity, etc., etc., etc. These bottlenecks are preventing. We'll talk about that later. So next is flexibility. So in terms of flexibility, online offers a maximum flexibility. Of course, you can even lie down and listen to your class. You can record and have the session re-telecast anytime. You can just goose off and then come back in the online classes anytime. But that is not going to be happening in offline. If you miss a thought, then it's gone. Okay, there is no flexibility. You are expected even to control nature's call. The very nature's call must be in time periods. Well, that is not the case with online education. Communication. Next, in terms of communication, the idea of communication is collaboration is happening is digitally in terms of online education, digital transfers. Everything is going to be a picture that is going to be placed in. While in traditional education, it is face to face. You know the expressions, you know the questions, all those bright lights happening on the face of a children when you're going to be taking classes traditionally. So in that case, the traditional education wins. We have a look at who is listening. I don't know who is listening to my talk right now. Okay, for somebody from an outsider will resemble like I'm talking on my own, right? So this kind of face-to-face interaction, this kind of human character of education is lost in online education. The human nature of education is lost in online education. At the end of the day, you need to put a man behind the trigger to pull it at right point of time. A gun can be automated, but you need to have a human to pull it at right point of time for the best. If you don't have a human, if you take human out of that, it's just a machine. The machine is not going to have sentiments. Okay, that can happen in online education. The type of approach in terms of online, mostly you could have seen it is facilitation. Teachers help you to get a knowledge. There is a document, you just ask it. This kind of facilitations, asynchronous approach. Okay, one place there may be a huge effort put in, another place there can be no effort. When I say in one place, another place, it means teachers end or children's end. Okay, sometimes the children may be ready and waiting for the class, the teacher may not be available. At the other end, the teacher might be putting a huge amount of effort to take a class. There will be no audience at all. Okay, these kinds of asynchronous approach is prevalent in online classes. Okay, so this way a student's letharginess or a faculty's letharginess can dictate the traveling course of the class itself or the traveling course of knowledge itself. Well, in traditional, it is not so. It's instructional. You write, you give the dictation, people write it down. It's synchronous. The complete class is synchronized. When the teacher talks, the students listen. When the teachers dictate, the students write down. Everything is synchronized. Everybody do it. Every children do it at the same point of time. While in terms of online education, not all the students do the same thing at the same point of time, right? So next is space of learning. One bigger thing with regard to the flexibility, you can put it up. Students largely determine the pace of learning in terms of online classes. Okay, it's not the teachers. In normal, conventional, traditional education, a teacher has a target. They have to the class to finish at certain point of time. They just write it down on the board. There may be few students who could understand it. So ultimately, the class goes on and ends. While in terms of online, it is the understandability of the students that determine the next class of online. If the student is not ready for it, you cannot furthermore move it. There is no response, right? So you have to go slow. So these are the comparing contradictions with regard to online and traditional. So now, the instructor's roles and responsibility. No one can deny the fact that with a new mode of education, there is a lot of responsibilities and role play for an instructor. In terms of traditional, an instructor or the teacher or a faculty or whatever may be the name you call it, their role is to provide the information, being a role model, being an assessor, planner, and developer. That's it. Okay, they provide the information. They come to the class. They dictate the things and they explain it. They being the role model. Sometimes you can see even in Tamil Nadu, you can see Tamil teachers particularly. They'll have a good discipline. They'll talk the proper words. Everything will be disciplined. The teachers, every teacher will become a role model. They'll be assessors. They'll know which kid is good, which kid is bad. Like for example, in a class, not everybody will be good in drawing. This traditional method of education will help a teacher to identify who is good in drawing, or any other arts, or any other subject, or any other science, whatever it may be. Some guy or girl may be good in mathematics, but not be good in other subjects. So this traditional education helps the instructor to pinpoint which kid is good in which and what they can do the best. Okay, this is completely absent mostly in online education. Okay, next, the role of instructor is a planner. The teacher plans everything. They'll know what to take for the first 10 minutes. They'll know what to do for the next 20 minutes. They'll do when to put the test, everything and all. Well, it's not the case with online. Nothing is planned. Nothing can be planned because there is a human touch that is absent. No teacher knows about their student. Nothing is discussed. They don't know the believability of a student, or even the students don't know the believability of staff. There is no human connect. So because of this, there are a lot of logical planning is missed out. Okay, and finally, the role of instructor in terms of traditional education is they are the developers, be it the student or the knowledge, both ways. They are the developers. They kindle it, they feed things, and they'll make rise it. And next is online education. The role of instructor with regard to online education. They are the facilitators, not the provider informations. The reason why I call it as facilitators because most of the time in online education, a student does not take a proper handwritten notes. The teacher discusses it and they give the topic. These topics are available, flourishingly in internet. So the teacher facilitates the students to go and search for that information in the online, or a written document to be downloaded. That's it. They don't give verbal instructions. Rather, they facilitate for the transfer of information. That's it. The information is loaded and logged. That's being transferred. So that is being facilitated by instructor. Next is pedagogical. What is pedagogic? Pedagogical is nothing but ways and means of teaching, how to bring in information. All these things must be taken in take. For example, now at this point of time, had I been in a traditional method of seminars, I would have not gone for these kinds of PPTs and all. So these kinds of modes, methods, how to put the information, how to write the formulas, etc., etc. These things must be brought in online education. That's a challenge for the instructor. Next is social. They have to be, enablers. They have to help the students. They have to have a rapport with the students. They have to talk politely with the students. Everything. So in this case, a teacher cannot be somewhat hard on the students. If that is going to be the case, the student will not be attending the class. So this is going to be a problem. Next is their managers. The teachers and instructors become managers in the traditional methods, in the online methods. That's because there is nothing in their planning. They are doing the plan that has been executed from higher hierarchy, be it the government or anybody who has executed a plan saying that this must be the point of time you have to go for examinations, etc., etc. Even if the student is not ready, the teacher doesn't have any other go. They have to go for a test. Where in the case of traditional examinations, it will be different. If for a class test, if the students are not ready, the teacher might not go with it. So these things. Next, in terms of online education, the instructors, the biggest role of instructors becoming technical. They have to become technical or they cannot survive. This is one of the biggest problems the teachers face right now. Okay, so next slide, will go in. Yeah. So furthermore, discussing about the roles and responsibilities of the instructors. They are content facilitators. They have the facility of the contents. They are technologists. A Tamil teacher need not be having a knowledge about computers, but unfortunately, they need to have knowledge about computers at that right now. That's a problem. Okay, there may be a well-versed teacher in your school or in your colleges earlier. They would have had an excellent knowledge of the topic. There can be no replace for them in mathematics or physics or whatever may be the tougher subjects. But those teachers are old. They are not illiterates. What is illiteracy? Every time we talk about literacy, there is something else called illiteracy. Illiteracy is nothing but how to use your digital platforms, computer, mobile phones, or whatever may be the digital platforms. So we always speak about in Tamil Nadu, take for example, we have 82% digital literacy, literacy rate and all. How many people of Tamil Nadu are digitally literate? When in terms of literacy rate, when somebody says people are literate, that doesn't means nothing but more than writing their name in a proper language. If you do write your name in a proper language in traditional method, then you're called as literate. That knowledge will not be enough to be present properly on digital platforms. And many of the teachers lack this knowledge. This is not their problem. That's a technological transfer. These teachers are not able to understand, come up with it. A lot of times I've seen even the teachers struggling to take the classes online. They don't know how to switch on the cameras or their put how their mics and unmute, etc., etc. These are age based difficulties that these old persons face, but you cannot question their knowledge with regard to the subject. Unfortunately, instead of their knowledge being valued, it is the other aspects of the class being valued. The feedbacks is based on wrong things. It's not about the knowledge of the teachers that the feedback goes on. Rather, the facilitation is being valued. This is wrong. Unfortunately, that is happening. Next is that the instructor's role is becoming a designer, as what we have done right now, becoming putting presentations, etc., etc. Next, I said managers and administrators, process facilitators, advisors, counselors. They have to keep on tagging the students. They have to advise them. Okay, and next is assessors and researchers. These all the combined responsibilities have been taken over by instructors right now. Earlier, this was not the case. They were not meant to assess there, but there can be anybody who can assess the knowledge of a student. Okay, now it is not the case. A teacher must know the way in which put up a assessment forum for that student. All these things are becoming a challenge. Okay, fine. Next, the biggest case study, as I've been saying at the very beginning, let us take and study the online education for the period of last 2 years. As this online education, as this education done every other thing, every other etc aspects of education that is present in traditional education done right now. If it has done it, then online education can replace traditional, as I said earlier. So we're going to look at with regard to facts. Fine. So the online education in India faces some unique problems that are very much, very much a part of Indian system. When I thought of discussing about this topic, when I was searching for informations, everywhere there was praise for the online education because it brought education to the doorsteps. There are places that are inaccessible. There are a lot of gender discriminations. Everywhere the online education was brought in. But unfortunately, the Indian case is always different because we rather have a different socio-economic setup in this country. So when you study and try to understand the effect of anything, you have to go detailed. Everything is having a unique Indian problem. For the other countries there'll be single language, we can communicate single-handedly. Here we have 22 scheduled languages. Everything there is, it's not a problem, it's a challenge, I'm saying. So everything you have to have an Indian periscope to look in. So with that Indian periscope, when I look into the online education, what I feel is there is a compounded union, unique Indian problem, which has been aggravated. The pre-existing problem that is present in the Indian educational system has been aggravated more than the gains. I find more lot of aggravation of pre-existing problems. What are the pre-existing problems? So Indian education faces a problem of urban rural education. You can see everywhere the quality of education in rural is somewhat compromised, while the quality in urban is good. The presence of books, materials, hand-ons, everything, etc., 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 is very good in traditional education itself. So this difference of urban and rural has been aggravated by online. Agreed or not? Internet is not properly present in many of the rural areas. Rural schools don't even have internet connections. A lot of times you cannot have a proper, nothing can be done, nothing communication can be done from a school to student. The school being present in rural areas itself, they cannot communicate to their children properly. So this gap of urban and rural in terms of education is widened. Next is public schools versus private schools. This is one other area. There is a gap. You can, no matter what you say, there is a huge gap in terms of knowledge transfer with regard to private and public schools. Just not knowledge transfers, curricular activities, co-curricular activities, extracurricular activities, skills, soft skills, decorum, dressing, etc., etc., etc. There is a gap between private and public schools. This gap is also widened. Okay. Next, boys versus girls. Let me say it very, very openly, girls, those who are listening to it. Have you been able to attend the classes without any hindrances from your family members asking you to do some household work? Have you been allowed to do it? Definitely, some girls, particularly girls, would have been asked to do some household works when they are having classes. So, a student from urban itself face these kinds of problems. Imagine this with regard to a girl in rural areas. Well, this is not the case with boys. Though we say with regard, because of this online education, physical presence is not being required, has helped certain girls to benefit out of it because they don't need to come out of their house. They don't need to face these kinds of dress based backlashes and all. That is acceptable. But at the other end, boys girls divide has played woefully wrong. This is not just with regard to students, not with regard to students alone. Even the instructors, a female instructor in a joint family or an extended family or a normal family, a female teacher would have to do all the other household works which they would have not done earlier at that point of time. Somebody would have taken that job, that household work. Now they have to fulfill their house needs as well as these kinds of instructional needs. So this gender divide is widened. Next is practicality of the class, or rich versus poor. Of course, I don't need to explain this obviously. In any case, the rich gets a good education, well, the poor always suffer, and that suffering is far more, stressed. If there's going to be three children in a house, a father cannot, will not, in a poor family, be able to afford multiple smartphones. The platform itself is not being present in a poor family. Forget about the quality being transferred. So this has widened like huge. Next is practicality of the classes. Not every kind of lesson be taken online. Understand these students. You cannot study medical knowledge based on online classes. You cannot study a proper engineering classes based on online knowledge. Any kind of professional education cannot be done through online classes. Arts and humanities at the most can be done best, but not professional education. Practical education, vocational educations cannot be done. At right now, at present point of time, the children who got engaged enrolled in China for MBBS are facing a problem because of COVID. They are not able to go back, and they're going to complete the degree, and they're going to complete their degree without handling any live cases at all. Imagine what kind of the doctors these people will turn out to be. I'm not blaming them. I'm blaming the things. Of course, you can say, sir, in tomorrow's world in the online, there can be holographs coming in. There can be furthermore advanced interactive technologies coming in that may enable without physical presence these things also. Of course, for that it will take time. Okay, next, caste. Obviously, there is a huge caste divide with regard to the education, and this is being spelled out. Of course, one way or other, it has helped the caste discriminations. There are certain people who have not been allowed to come into an educational system. They can be helped. There will be no discrimination furthermore faced. When I say discriminations, verbal discriminations also that is happening in education institutions based on caste. This is happening in the highest institutions also. There are episodes in IIT also. This can be avoided. But at the other end, caste has also created problem with regard to the availability of online platforms. Certain people from depressed class or oppressed class don't have access to these things. Don't most of the time the education for them is a place where to have food. So these things are compromised. Next is illiteracy, as I've said earlier. With regard to India, when you take literacy, it may be in a good number. In particularly in southern states, the number may be good. When you take what is illiteracy, we don't have a very good number. When I'm saying we don't have a very good number, it is not just not with common population. Even with teachers, hierarchical, positional HODs, principals, even these peoples don't have a good illiteracy. And there is nothing to blame about them. Okay, it's the knowledge that must be welcomed. Okay, these are some unique Indian problems, and furthermore to add about it. So from March 2020 to the year end of the year, schools were primarily closed with minor period reopening in 2021. Secondary schools were open for a period of not more than 40 to 50% of times in 2021, and elementary schools were completely closed in 12 of the 22 major Indian states. So this explains the transfer that has happened in the COVID time. Mostly the transfer was an online platform. So this gives us a right case study for us to understand the online education. So only 22 point, according to UNESCO, only 22.3% of the schools across the country, government and private, be it government or private or any kind of schools, only 22.3% of the schools in India as a whole had internet facility in 2019 to 20. Of course, mostly this number was good in private education, but it is worst in public education. I mean, government schools. Okay, imagine what kind of platform, what kind of transfer would have happened. The facility itself is present for just 22.3%, which means to say this mode, what you call as a platform, is itself available for only 22 students of 100. Only 22 students of the 100 will have a platform to walk on, right? So access to the internet in the schools is 19% all over the India, only 14% in rural areas, and compared to 42% in urban areas. So this proves our point. There is a huge divide between urban and rural. Okay, where in which 42% urbans gain, while of course that itself is a lesser number, where it is 14% in rural. So next, some other challenges. Some of the challenges faced by teachers are lack of technical knowledge, limited access to pertinent study materials, apps like PPTs, Excel sheets, etc., etc. They don't have a proper access to these apps, etc., etc., to teach properly them. Of course, it is very tough to write a mathematical equation on an online platform. You have to have a traditional board and all to have it. Of course, there is a virtual transfer that is happening. There is different case. Insufficient monitoring of discipline. This is a very important thing that is killing the education. As I said, education is about decorum, discipline, grooming, etc., etc. That is not being monitored. Problem, of course. Sometimes your proper grooming can also affect your improper grooming can also affect the kids' health. That is also must be taken care of. So, problem of keeping students engaged. That's one big problem. Even in a traditional dictatorial classes, it's very tough to maintain keep the students engaged. When I take classes in traditional sense, what I do is I just take a break. I can drink water. I can write something on the board and ask the students to solve and maintain a gap for 2 minutes or something like that. I can relax myself. I can give rest to my throat and all. That cannot happen in online education, my friends. When your teachers talking, And if they, suddenly if they maintain a silence for just not more than 30 seconds, you will leave the class. To constantly keep them engaged, not even the greatest, I have attended Dr. Kalam's class. Even if Dr. Kalam speaks, he gives a pass for 30 to 50 minutes. I mean, for 30 to 50 seconds. He takes a pass. He gives a break for himself to recollect the topics and all. But that is itself a luxury in online class for a teacher. Okay. So the difficulty of tracking students' progress, once again. So some of the challenges faced by students are digital divide. Of course, digital divide with regard to gender, with regard to urban poor, etc., etc., etc. Lack of digital literacy, difficulties of sudden transition. So mostly in higher educations and all, you cannot learn higher end mathematical equations or physical equations in online so easily. That is a problem. So next, according to recent study, online schools remain woefully inefficient across the country. Over 80% of teachers, as published by Boston Consulting Group, said it was impossible to maintain an emotional connection with the online mode of education. As I said earlier, there is no humanness in education in online. The human nature of education is lost. There is no, it is impossible for a teacher. 80% of the teachers of India have said it is impossible to maintain an emotional connection with the students. That's a very, very depressing fact. The constitution writer of India, Dr. Ambedkar, do you know how he got his name? It was not actually his original name, it was his teacher's name. His teacher played a huge emotional role in his life that he adopted his teacher's name as his own name. Of course, no need to that level of emotional connect with the teachers, between teachers and staffs. You need to have some emotional connect with the staff, right? At this point of time, 80% of teachers have said there is no emotional connect and it is impossible to have it. This is one worrying fact. Okay. So, a study by Asim Premji University in 2022 among 16,000 students in 5 states between the class 2 to 6 have found some startling problematic facts. 92% of the children, 92% of 16,000 students in 5 states have lost one specific language ability: reading, writing, listening. Of these abilities, they have lost at least one ability completely compared to the previous year. 82% of the students of this list have lost one mathematical ability. Arithmetic or calculations or any ability, they've lost one ability. Okay, a student who has missed a year of schooling will be able to catch up in 9 to 14 years. So if you just lose 1 year of schooling without knowledge and you skip to another class, you'll be somewhat not fulfilled with the knowledge. It will take years for you to cement the gap. A parliamentary standing committee report in August 2020 quoted UNICEF saying 40% of students have not any remote access. They are not connected to any kind of remote access at all. So they are virtually out of the education system. You can claim them they are studying in a school. They are not studying at all. When I say schoolings, it's just not schoolings alone. It includes college studies also. 40% are not at all connected to any remote sensing, any remote learning, be it recorded, TV telecasted, or WhatsApp based, or anything. They are not connected to anything. Forget about active classes. Okay, so this learning loss of critical proportion, children have lost a tenth of their entire schooling, of the school total schooling compounded. 1/10 have been lost in this way itself. So this is a worrying fact. So next is one of the other important thing which I am worried. There is a 490% rise reported in child rescue requests from during the school closures, and you will not believe, even in Tamil Nadu, there is a 280% rise in child labors during the lockdown, where in which online education was prescribed. It's a lockdown. You cannot come out of your house. Still 280% rise in child labors. Globally, 9 million children are in the danger of child labors because of a new platform. You cannot blame this as COVID. It's about the unavailability of online platform or the controllability of online platform. No, the dictatorialness that is being offered in traditional education helped everybody, be it students or parents or the society or anybody, to maintain a hold on the students and make them listen, sit down, everything. But now that hold is missed. Because of that, there is a predation in child labor, rise in child marriage. As the education is not qualified, as the education is not in good quality, compromise in education is happening. People feel that it is not one of the priority essential thing. So because of that, they go lazy on education. And when this laziness continues for more than a year, What happens? You'll be forced to do other things. That is what is happening with regard to child marriage or child labor, etc., etc. and all. I wouldn't blame this completely on online education, but online education has broken the shackles that was preventing the children from being forced into these things. A proper education was putting up some kind of control mechanisms, but that is being broken in online education. Household works and girl child, etc., that we've discussed already. ASCR report 2018, pre-pandemic, only 2.5% of children aged 6 to 14 were not enrolled in the country. Before the pandemic, only 2% of the overall children's numbers were not registered in the um, what to say, schools. While after 2020 to 21 survey, it has doubled, more than doubled to 4.6%. So which you can understand, which you can get the point that the new mode of online education did not sufficiently bring in students. Okay. So next other thing, the unique Indian problem, nutritional midday meal schemes. 35% of the children today, I mean, the when the online classes were happening, did not receive any kind of proper midday meals. So, being in a state of Tamil Nadu, we should know how the midday meals helped to create an educational revolution in Tamil Nadu. But unfortunately, this is what the status right now is. Since the beginning of pandemic, 39 billion in school meals have been missed due to schools closures around the world. Well, some children have put on excessive weight due to loss of physical effort. You can see mostly this with regard to rich and urban children. A lot of children have put up extra weight. They become obese. That's a problem. That's really a problem, my guys. India is the only country where we have both obese children and stunned children. According to Hangama report, 54% of Indian children before the pandemic itself, 54% before the online classes took up itself, before the pandemic itself, 54% were malnutrition. When I say malnutrition, they did not get the proper nutritious food. And of these overall 100% of these of the 100%, 40% were stunned. So what is stunned? Stunned means if there are just imagine there are two twins, two boys. You give good food for one boy and you make a normal food for another guy. Okay, what happens is over a period of time, this kid who has been given proper food will be somewhat taller, somewhat muscular and all. So this is what you mean about stunned. If a kid of today is being given proper nutrition, would they or would they not be in a good BMI index? Yes, they'll be. And of that, in that ratio, 40% of Indian children are stunned, which means to say, had they been given a proper food, they would have been good BMI. Okay. So, one side, the online education or physical contactless traditional loss of traditional education. You can say it in that way. The loss of traditional education has made one place the children's obese, others end has made the children's midday meals nutritious levels down. Okay. So next, social and emotional contact. This is one important thing because as there is no collective things, emotional bonding with the friends, peers, groups, interaction, socialization, etc., etc., play things, schools, grounds, plays, cultural activities, etc., etc., etc. All these things as a part of school life is missed by a child. You don't have a tour, you don't have a annual day celebrations, or you don't have a dance and all those things. You don't have a competition, you don't have a painting things to explain, exhibit yourself. Everything is missed in addition to the interactions with your friends, peer interactions, friendly interactions, friendly bonding, play areas. Everything is missed. All these things have created emotional stress in the children's. Since May 2020, one third of elementary children and half of secondary schools have had mental and socio-economic health. Half of secondary education students, 50% of Indian secondary education students have had some kind of mental or socio emotional health problems. Rise in number of children who have developed anxiety or depressions attributing to chronic stress, uncertainty. That is one other thing. That is for the college students, particularly, I would say. Not being able to socialize with their peers have negatively impacted all group schools, all age groups in their social. All age groups. When I mean by all age groups, it is not just school alone. Everybody. You're not able to interact with them. You forget the art of speaking. So language's ability have been compromised, emotional skills have been compromised, everything is being compromised. Okay. So next, this is about the information from the NIMHANS. So National Institution of Mental Health and Neuroscience has published certain guidelines and brought out certain issues. According to this, the author has pointed out the children's becoming more clingier, more attention seeking, more desperate on their parents, dependent on their parents, increase in gaming behavior, significant anxiety due to postpones of examinations, and of course rise in anxiety and depressions, everything. So all these things, the mental ability, have been compromised in all ages of students, and this has been said by National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. Though we are going to be speaking about online education, the reason I'm mentioning this is the online education, the trial period of online education that happened for the last 2 years. What are all the problems with it? If you understand that, we can understand it. This is the thing which I'm been trying to say from the very beginning. The last 2 years case study will help us to understand pros and cons of online education. So we are looking in that way. You should not say COVID is a reason for that. These reports are published by certain institutions that looked up into the online nature of the education. So with that only we are speaking, with that facts only speaking. Okay. So next, creative suffers. This is very important. As I said, you are not allowed to dance, you are not allowed to do play music, you are not allowed to do any extracurricular co-curricular activities. Your ability, physical fragility, everything is increased. So even to draw a picture, for instance, my daughter wants to google and look at it first. This was one of the statement from a parent said to me directly. Okay. For even to draw a circle, children are now looking at YouTubes and Googles. Okay, this is a problem. Even though the children have been well versed in navigating internet, they do know to use the internet very best, more than your parents of 50 years or 60 years. The children are able to use internet very properly. When I say parents, of course, nobody will not believe. In today's social media platforms, it is the age old group of 50 plus who are the more fake news spreaders. Mostly the parents of 50 plus years don't know what they get is right or wrong. If somebody says it historical, they'll forward it. So this is how the fake news spreads. It is not the other way. People always think the youngsters spread the fake news. No, you could see in your parents also. Many of the students who are listening can think and find it in your parents itself. They'll not know what it is. Even when you say it is wrong, they'll not believe you. If somebody says in internet, some lame idiot says in internet, in YouTube and all, they'll believe it and spread it. So this is how fake news spreads. Well, that is not the case with regard to the children's, but there is some other maturity that is being lost. They don't know where to go. They know to go everywhere, but they don't know where to go specifically for the knowledge required. So there is creative things that has been completely lost. Next new phenomenon, cyberbullying. Of course, this cannot be well explained than from the state of Tamil Nadu, where in which two actors fans fight like brute on the internet. Can you imagine what kind of cyberbullying that will be happening on the internet, on the online platforms? We don't have any solution for it. As a country where in which more single child children are born, we have not even understood what is panic attack till now. These kinds of pandemic has created huge panic attacks all over the world. There are medications, there are ways and means of it. We don't even know what is panic attack. So imagine what are the other things that will be happening for a single child particularly. So cyberbullying, etc., is happening. Sexual abuses and harassments. The classic case is Tamil Nadu, where in which a particular school was involved in sexual abuse. Of course, let me take a point. This is not just confined to online education alone. These kinds of sexual predations happen in offline also. I accept it, but still, in online, the visibility is bigger. The visibility of the crime or the doer is bigger. So because of that, more people come into the vulnerability at a single point of time. What is vulnerability? If there is going to be a problem happening, how many people are present at that point of time? If there is going to be only one standing over there, then at least one kid is going to be facing a problem. If there is going to be 10 to 15 standing at that point of time at that place, then all those become vulnerable at that instant. That vulnerability maximization has happened with regard to sexual harassment and these kinds of online, that nobody can deny it. Okay, right? And once again, I'm saying these kinds of sexual harassment is also happening in traditional. We have to find ways and means to stop it. Okay, stop it completely. So other major health issues that has been faced by the children in the last 2 years: eyesight problem, lack of classroom ethics, bad ergonomics. What is ergonomics? They don't sit properly in the chair to listen to class. Because of that, their body is fragile, their physical ability is fragile, backbone ache, etc., comes in. Lack of physical activities. The muscle growth is reduced, agility is reduced. Lack of vitamin D. You don't go into the sun, you lose vitamin D. There are compounded effects of losing vitamin D. Calcium deficiency. It may be hard for you to believe, but as you are sitting in the same place, you can ask doctors also. They will say, if you're hospitalized for a period of 1 week or so, you can feel pains in your legs and hands. That's because you didn't move at all. there is a loss of calcium. These things can happen when there is no physical activity. So I'm not comparing this with regard to education, I'm comparing with the loss of physical activity. When in online there is no physical activity at all, so that, right? And finally, annual status of education report ASER in August 2021 is that 28% of rural children studied regularly. Only 28% studied regularly. 37% did not study at all. So you can understand the gap. 37% of rural children did not study at all. It's very worrying. It's very worrying. Okay, for a country like India, that's very worrying. Of those who are able to study, only 8% regularly attended online classes or learned through videos. Why? Compounded factors. When I say compounded factors, I mean the bottlenecks: unavailability of internet, no internet in schools, platforms not properly managed, content writing, instructional designs not being created. There is a field, a whole new field called instructional designs. What is instructional design? How to teach these chapters in internet. There will be certain videos and all. It has not been designed completely for every curriculum right now. Okay, all these things prevented a proper transfer. In addition to the bad, bad, the physical presence also. When you don't have a physical presence, you don't have a proper control. In terms of urban area, even that too didn't far good and all. Students who are studied regularly were slightly better at 47% when compared to the rural areas. And in rural area, in urban areas, 92%, 19% students did not study at all. Of course, that's somewhat a good number with when compared to rural areas, but still, of the 100 students in urban areas, 20 did not study at all. So in that case, education as a whole is not, replaced. What was given in traditional education was not replaced even to the 50% level in India. At least if it is done till 50% of the effectivity, we can say it's not the quality of the education. Even the quantity is not being delivered. Look at these numbers. Till now, we were talking about the quality of education, the problems faced in the online education, the quality of online. Even in quantity, it is not sufficed. Even in quantity, only 28% in rural and 47% in urban had an access to online education. So, quantity is also compromised, quality is also compromised. Now, so does that mean online education is bad? Okay, so before we go into that, this is one last survey. 93% of Indian parents believe the traditional method of learning are best suited for their children. So everybody, the will and wish of parents, students, teachers, everybody are more preferred towards traditional learning than the online learning. Okay, but with all these things being said, with all these things being said, does that mean online education is a problem and we should not go furthermore with it? No. If you look closely at what I said, I've been from the very beginning pointing out these problems as bottlenecks. Bottlenecks like there's a traffic jam. A huge traffic has been blocked at one point of time at one area. If it is being cleared properly in an effective channel, it can be a smoother transition. We have to overcome these bottlenecks. Internet issues, regulations, monitoring, instructional designs, gender inequalities, caste-based discriminations, everything can be sorted out. Of course, still online cannot completely replace traditional educations because there are certain chapters, certain knowledge can be transferred traditionally only. Classic example is medical studies. You cannot teach surgery in online. Okay. Of course, in future, in next 50 years or something like that, you can get a complete holographic transition to that kind of knowledge also. But at this point of time, even if the all the bottlenecks are cleared, even if complete internet connectivity is being provided, every children is given free mobile, tablet or something like that, being provided with free internet connectivity. Everything, even if all these bottlenecks are being cleaned, and if the teachers are being taught, even instructional designs are being brought, new methods of instruction, online virtual things being provided, produced by country itself, by the government itself, instead of just paper based books. Even if the country produces these things, even after all these things being done, all these bottlenecks being cleared, still the problem is not every subject has an adaptability with regard to online. So my point at the end of this webinar is the present problems as a whole, what we face in this country with regard to online is the bottlenecks that is being created because the adaptability to technology is not fully done, which can be overcome, in another decade or so. Even if that being done, even that being said, not every knowledge can be trained in online education. Certain professional knowledge can only be transferred in offline education. So that sums my point. Okay. Traditional knowledge has a higher advantage with regard to emotional connect, putting humans in education, creativity, practicality of knowledge. All these things provide a higher hand for traditional knowledge comparing with online. But still, online has its own advantages. You can learn a new language very easily in online. You can learn new abilities in online. Your arts and humanities style, your older literatures, your older books, your new avenues of knowledge, new avenues of soft skills. All these things can be gained online. Okay, so there is a advantage with regard to online as well as undeniable problem with online. Both the things are there. So it is the trigger, the human nature that should, come in and say what should be done in what medium. So this is where pedagogists need to come in. People like us need to come in and say this education, this mode of education, or this stream of education. This stream of education is good in online, while this stream of education can be good only in offline. So we have to have this distinction clearly. What can be taught in online should can be taught in online. What should be taught in offline traditional methods must be taught in traditional method only as of now. So this is what I would say to the people who are listening. So in my opinion, everything has its advantage, and we should not be too cautious about everything going wrong. We should work on it, as like the first Prime Minister of India said. Okay, thank you guys. With this, I'll close my session. Okay, so it was a nice session to have. In if there's any doubts or questions or any other comments you need to put up, comment on the comments line. Thank you guys.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable speech about can online education replace traditional education. Vote of thanks will be given by Sangeeta, intern of Aimo.
Thankfulness is the best form of courtesy. Good evening, this is Sangeeta, an intern of Aimo Tnsb. I firstly thank the Almighty God whose blessing has led to the successful conclusion of this webinar. I express my wholehearted thanks to our resource person, Mr. N. Jayachandran sir, for gracing this occasion and educating us. I extend my wholehearted thanks to our company, Mr. Ramesh Dugar, Chairman, Dr. Vinod Surana, Senior Vice Chairman, Mr. Sudhakar Mukundan, General Secretary, Mr. Charles Ratnaswamy, Executive Director, for their constant support. I thank all the participants who have joined this webinar. Thank you all once again.